Good evening. I love these things. I want to take a moment to welcome you to the William D. Harvey Theater. I'm Audrey Wolf, and I'm Director of Alumni Engagement here at Olympic College. This evening's presentation is the second in the series of the year of the Alumni Speaker Series. This series strives to offer engaging and educational topics that are relevant in today's world. With a quick show of hands, how many alumni do we have in the audience? Wonderful. Okay, thank you for returning to Olympic College for this event, and welcome other guests for joining us this evening. There are sign-in sheets being passed around. There's a clipboard you will see. They're coming both directions, and so please do sign in. Let us know if you would like to be added to our e-newsletter, The Lookout, to hear about other upcoming events. A little bit of housekeeping if you haven't been here before. If you go outside the restrooms, outside the theater, to the right, turn right again, and they'll be over on your left-hand side down towards the end. This evening's presentation, Mastering the Law of Attraction, will be presented by the Olympic College alum, Dr. Pete Dufour. Dr. Dufour, aka the Slender Sprinter, ran track at the Olympic College in 1949 and 1950. He first arrived in Bremerton on board the USS Columbus in 1948. Later that year, after his naval discharge, Pete enrolled at OC. During his entire OC career, he won 5 conference championships. He was named the most inspirational in both 1949 and in 1950. After graduating from OC, Pete was awarded a track scholarship to the University of Washington. He went on to teach at the political science at Gray's Harper College for 12 years, and there he was named Outstanding Educator in 1970. From there, he worked for the Department of Defense in Europe to provide educational services to the military. Upon his return to the U.S. in 1989, Dr. Dufour established the private counseling practice that he still operates in Corvallis, Oregon. In summary, Pete leads a very inspiring life. He has asked that we hold questions until after the lecture is finished. You are welcome to ask questions at that time or come up to the stage after we close. Won't you join me in welcoming Dr. Pete Dufour?
Thank you. Thanks. So welcome today to all of you. I want this to be an interesting time for you, a joyful time, a kind of a fun time, and something informative that hopefully you can take with you and not only learn from the lecture, but learn from some of the sources that I'm going to suggest to you. And if it's just a lecture, as you know, oftentimes it's quickly forgotten. So I want to tell a few stories in the process. That's important. But also I want to reference the book that I'll be using and that you'll have a chance to get, that I wrote one time about maybe 10 years ago, called The Experiment. And some of the concepts that I have in here are actually written in this book. Now, it's a very simple book. In fact, it's so simple that this book has 39 pages. I wrote it on a weekend and then made a few changes, of course, when I had someone edit some of my work. And the thing that's so interesting is I woke up one night, which is where most of my good ideas come from, by the way, and I said, I'm going to have 7 chapters. And the reason I thought, well, 7 chapters in a book that I wrote on a weekend. I said, yeah, because there's 7 days in a week. So if you read 5 pages on Monday, chapter 1, chapter 2, 5 pages, all the way through Sunday, and then I suggest you start with chapter 1 again for about 15 minutes to read, then chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, what do you think is going to happen as you read it the second time? You know, don't you? You're going to be surprised of the things that you read, and you didn't realize the importance of it until you tie all 7 chapters together, and then it has a complete explanation of the law of attraction. Some of the things I'll be talking to you today, I think you probably already know like there's nothing new under the sun, as we say. You probably know it. The problem with mastering the law of attraction is that even though you know the concepts, most people do not practice the concepts. So to make it work, you have to practice. So it's simple. For example, anyone can throw a baseball reasonably easy. You pick up a baseball and you throw it. But with practice, you throw to the target with practice. So it takes practice on anything that we're going to get good at. Now, I was thinking there are 3 ways I could start this introduction. And I decided of the 3, one, which is tell a story. And the story is one of my favorite. It's called the Zen story. It's about a professor at Princeton University, a real story, by the way, who studied Zen and philosophy. He read all the ancient texts, the Upanishads, and many other things that were kind of related. And he decided one day he was going to come to see the Zen master, one of the Zen masters in Japan, and have a conversation. So he went to see the Zen master, and the Zen master greeted him. He sat down, and the professor started talking about all the things he had done, all the research over years and years, many manuals, many different kind of books. And he said, but I wanted to learn from you. And as he's talking, the Zen master, with the tea ceremony, which is typical in Japan, started to pour tea into the 2 cups. And all of a sudden, the professor says, the cups are running over, and it's hot. It's on my pants. And the Zen master said, you know, you got to empty it, okay? You got to empty what's in your mind before you can learn something. Aha, I see. So you have to empty before you can learn something. So from that simple story, one night I woke up and I thought, you know, it's interesting that most people breathe all their life and they really don't breathe correctly. And then I remembered a doctor when I was a medic in the service working with Marines as a medic, that a doctor told me, Pete, you know, you're too upset. You need to start breathing when you're in a crisis situation. And I said, well, I do breathe. He said, well, I want you to start breathing this way. I want you to start by breathing first out. Like, he showed me that. I said, oh, breathe out? I'm used to breathing in. The problem is when you breathe in first, your lungs are already full, and so is your diaphragm. Now this is a very simple story. But you see, that's why people can't breathe diaphragmically. Because if they get upset or they breathe, it's shallow. Because 80% of your lungs and your diaphragm is with oxygen. So I use another example. If I go to the gas station and say to the gas attendant, fill my tank, and he says, it's already full. You're going to have to empty it so I can fill the tank. And it's amazing how calming that process is. And the law of attraction says if you really be good at something, you need to relax. You need to relax. Don't try so hard all the time. Relax. Breathe. Breathe in. Relaxation. Nice and slow. And you just empty everything. It all relaxes, including your stomach. And then all of a sudden you're breathing in, and you're filling it from the diaphragm up to the chest. And this is very calming for people. I work with a lot of people who have anxieties. And in one session, not only do I talk to them and deal with their issues, but I teach them the breathing technique. And they say that breathing technique is one of the best that they ever experienced. In fact, I did that today with someone. And he said, you know, I feel like my blood pressure just went down. So that breathing technique is in my website. You can go to the blog and you can read the full article on that. Now, second thing I want to talk about is, and by the way, Will Rogers said something very interesting about emptying the mind. He said, you may remember something of seeing him on TV occasionally. He's long past. And he used to have a lasso, and he had this kind of iconic individual, and he'd say, it isn't what we don't know that so often would cause us any problems. It's what we know that isn't true that will cause us problems. Very interesting. Very interesting. I believe that everyone here is listening, and you have your thoughts about what I'm saying. And sometimes those thoughts drift off in many, many different ways. And I respect every one of you in terms of how you respond to anything that I say, because my responsibility here is to present a message. It's not important to me that you have to agree with everything. In fact, it's not likely at all. So, a second story that's personal. Much of what I do kind of is that way. You see, you're not supposed to be personal, but anyway. It's personal, but it has a message at the end. And that is when I first came to OC, right after the war. I remember landing. I'm from California, so, you know, I didn't want to go back there again. So I got discharged here, and I fell in love with the Northwest. The trees, I call them the forests. I look at the forests. I wasn't used to forests. I was used to beaches. And so anyway, we came into Bremerton. I saw the outline of all the ships and so forth. And then all of a sudden I said, I think this is where I want to go to school for some reason. I just had a feeling about that. So I walked around town, and I finally talked to somebody in the administration. And they said, yeah, we have classes. I said, what do you have your classes? Quonset huts. All the first year were all Quonset huts. And so I talked to the track coach, and he said, you're good. He said, we're going to give you a scholarship, because they knew what I had done in California. He said, we'll give you a scholarship. So I went to the registrar, and I said, there's a problem. The GI Bill, they're going to be a couple, 3 months before I can get paid. I don't have the tuition of $39. Wow, you know, that was a lot of money, to $39. He said, well, I'll tell you what, we can't give you a favor, you know, like we've been here lately. You can't do you a favor, but we'll take the money from your scholarship, and you can pay through your scholarship. So I said, that's great. Well, actually, I hadn't been eating for a while. That's why the reason I think you call me the slender sprinter, is I was kind of wasting away a little bit. But that day, I remember I hadn't been eating. And Narc Rethke, great guy, he's the coach, he's lovable, wonderful person. He came in to see me, and he said, how are you doing? I said, fine. And he walked in, he had a bag, some kind of a bag of stuff, and put it on the table. I looked at it, it looked like it was food. But he didn't say anything about the food. He just said, I hope you're doing fine. He said, but I only have a couple of things to say to you. And I said, what's that, Dr. Rethke? He said, run fast, be strong, you have the making of a champion. And he looked right at me, and it just riveted right into my eyes. And you know what? I have never forgotten that. In 30 seconds, he changed my life. See, many of you in this room may have had the same experience personally, or you may have actually provided somebody with the kind of insight like that. Because the key is this: helping people to believe in themselves. That could be the most important thing we can do as parents in any capacity, is to help people to begin to believe in themselves and not on outside forces. Not how many people you have on your Facebook, none of that stuff. So it's okay. But it's more that, see. So that's the message, is that find people who you can say things to them in a way, in a kind of a non-instructive, maybe sometimes off-the-cuff comment. Did anyone ever tell you how wonderful you are? Huh? Has anyone ever told you how wonderful you are? Has anyone ever told you, how great you can be? Not what you think you are, but who you really are. It's hidden in many people. So we can kind of orchestrate that story into every day. So the beauty of the story, and people say, it's very personal, sure, but see, it has a message. There's a message there. And the message is, it profoundly affected my life entirely. Totally. So day after day and week after week and month after month and year after year, and there's been a lot of them since then, since 48 or 49, whatever it is. Yeah, you live it. And you're just living it. You see? Because somebody caught me at a right time when I was kind of vulnerable, because I just got out of the Navy, and I was not particularly a happy camper with that experience. And I don't remember saying anything very nice to me, as a rule, maybe good job or something. So all I'm just simply saying is, be sure to do that. Now, this is about the mastering the law of attraction. Now again, most people know about it, but they don't practice it particularly, and that's why they have maybe a little difficulty. So in my little, very simple book of 39 pages, I do have a warning. The publisher said, well, this is a great little book, but you have a blank on the back. You don't have anything on the back side. You want a picture? And I said, no, I don't want a picture. Well, what do you want? I said, well, I'll think about it. So I usually think about things, and then I forget about it. And then I woke up. And I help people sometimes stop smoking, so even then I was a big fan of not smoking. And I saw a red, kind of a block, red marks on the outside. And inside, I said, this book may cause you instant freedom, deeply satisfying relationships, and may improve your life instantly. So it's a warning, beware. It may happen. So that's what's on the book. And this is actually, the law of attraction, you can go to a library and you'll have rows and rows of books on the law of attraction. And you get lost in it. I can't keep copies of this thing. People want them. It's interesting. They say, well, that's a great book. Can I have 3 more for my friends? Can I have 2 more for my friends? Now, this was inspired, really, it's hard to know always to say what inspires me or what inspires you. Sometimes it's simply a sense of love. Sometimes we're inspired by friends, by parents, by coaches, by teachers. We're inspired sometimes by a spiritual or religious context. So, as you probably know, those of you that have read the Bible, you know the proverb says, as a man thinketh, so he is. They don't use the word man, but as a man thinketh, so is he. That's exactly what the law of attraction says. It's the same thing. Whatever you think about, you attract. That's it. Whatever you think about, you attract. So your thoughts actually can become things. Your thoughts can become things. Now, I wonder if some of you kind of raise your hand, kind of know what I'm talking about. Yeah, see? Smart people. Smart people. And those that haven't, you just didn't get exposed to it, but I will just go ahead and kind of give you my interpretation. And those of you that have done that, you probably understand, what I'm saying. You see, if I have a thought, an aspiration, or you have one about something, you think about it, you process it, you talk to maybe very important people in your life, and all of a sudden you think, this is how I want to build it. I want to build it this way. I want to start a new business. I want to get a new product. I want to do this now. I want to become a doctor. Now, all of a sudden, now action takes place. Because then you take the creation of an idea and you put it into reality. So it's very simple. What you think about, whatever the thoughts are, you actually manifest it in your life. Because thoughts are like magnets. You know what a magnet is? It draws to you. The universe draws to you your thoughts. Your thoughts are not just random thoughts that stay within you. Because when you aspire to something or you have a thought, you're sending out energy waves. I talked to somebody today about energy waves. You're sending out energy waves. And those energy waves are reverberating back to you. They're reverting back to you with insight, with understanding, with confidence, with a sense of self-esteem and self-image, because it becomes automatic. So you don't have to create it artificially. So the experiment gives it all to you basically. Now, someone asked me recently, and when I gave a talk down in Los Angeles, in Newport, they said, well, what is the meaning of life, do you think? And I said, there's no meaning to life. And they looked at me and they said, wow, this guy says there's no meaning. I said, no, there's no meaning to life. There are meanings to life. Everyone picks and chooses their meaning to life. Okay? So, if you're going to preach this stuff, talk this stuff, if the question comes back, which hope I'll have some questions, of course, the question is, well, what is your belief? What do you think? And I said, it's easy. I was born to create. Now that covers the landscape. I was born to create. I was born to enjoy life. I was born to have fun. I was born to dream, and I was born to realize my dreams. That's my definition, right? So create whatever it is in your mind, what the meaning of life is. And normally, most of the ideas that I have, one time Einstein said this, I read it when I was really young. I didn't understand the mathematics, of course. I didn't know that. I still have some problems with that. But he basically said, imagination is more powerful than knowledge. That's far more important than knowledge. And I thought about his comment. And so the whole idea is we need to turn more inward in a time where everything is forcing us, some people, to look outside themselves without an awareness of what's inside. Because what's hidden inside is a mystery we don't even realize, because it's subconscious, it's unconscious, and yet it keeps us alive. So I ask people about their mind, and they usually point here, okay? This is about 3% of mind power. That's about right. Stretch it a little bit, maybe 5% of mind power. Well, what's the other 95%, 97%? It's unconscious. We don't think about it. We don't think that we pump 40 gallons of blood a day, more or less, right? It just does it. And it's been doing it since we were conceived. Okay? So you have to understand that about how that operates. So what you want to do then is come to the conclusion, what is really life about? And what's my role in that life? What can I do? And sometimes we have to let go of the thinking in order to find the answer. And I bet all of you have experienced this. You have a problem, and you talk about it, you discuss it, you write things down, and then you kind of give up. No, well, fine. You give up. And all of a sudden you get this brilliant idea. You wake up at night, or you're just doing something, and you say, oh, you know, I know the answer. It came from space. That's what Einstein was talking about. You know, when he made those mathematical calculations, he never was conscious of what they were. His hand just moved. It moved. See, that's what great thinkers and great composers do. One of the composers said one time, I've never rewritten a note when I compose. I just write it. And Mozart, it's been said, Mozart never rewrote a note. Never rewrote a note. Now, that's remarkable, isn't it? Just like Einstein. He said, you know, Omar Khayyam said something about, you know, having writ, it becomes reality. Yeah, so it's kind of like that. So the dual mind, 5%. So what does the thinking mind do? It thinks, it analyzes, it has willpower, and short-term memory. So people, for example, who have, say, Alzheimer's, that part of the mind is fractured, and so they won't remember what they did 5 minutes ago. But it doesn't control behavior, and it doesn't manage habits. The subconscious, on the other hand, does all of those other things. In other words, the subconscious mind is operating like a computer, a biological computer. It runs your blood, runs your breathing, rebuilds your body basically every 12 months. You know, if you're lucky, I mean, pretty much that, right? And so whatever the skin or hair or what you might have, normally it'll come back, right? And so it's being rebuilt, all of that. And then also it has the world of imagination. It has a world of imagination. What a beautiful imagination is. And the reason that the imagination is so powerful is there's no limitation. Knowledge is limited. Knowledge is finite. Imagination is infinite. So wouldn't it be a good idea to connect with that mysterious part of your mind that you're really not aware of? So how do you connect? How does one connect to the mystery that's within us? You can call it the wisdom within us, the wizard within us. Remember the Wizard of Oz? He was a normal person, wasn't he? But remember what the wizard did? with the tinsman and so forth. He helped them to believe in themselves. Okay? So that's important to know that. It also, so it has the imagination, it has all the habits, all our habits are there, and it's designed to protect us. That's why we have eyes, that's why we have taste, that's why we hear, because it's to help us survive everyday living. So it's important to recognize that the subconscious mind is like a biological computer like you have at home. Thinking is more like what? What would be the analogy of what would be the analogy that you would use in the case of the thinking mind? If the subconscious is a computer, biological computer, that has all the data, what does the thinking mind operate from? What vantage point? What would be a good analogy of the thinking mind? Anyone? Right. It is, you're right, it's a very good point, that the subconscious mind, okay, operates on one principle. The thinking mind is a keyboard. It's a biological keyboard. You're walking around with a biological keyboard, keyboard rather, and you're walking around with this inner computer inside of you. So who's to decide what goes in there? You do. You do by changing your thinking. So I see patients every day. I love what I do. I love this. Doing this with you. And it's so often, I ask them those questions about how they see everything, how they see themselves, how do they feel about themselves, and so forth. And they oftentimes say, my problem is, I've never been able to sleep well. I've always had problems with anxiety. I have trouble with authority. I have a lot of anger in my life. I have panic attacks. I have anxiety attacks. I'm worried about my kids. Okay? It goes on and on and on and on. The list goes on and on. Now, some people don't have all those, but some are pretty close to having all those. And so, what's happening is they're sending to the biological computer data. And its responsibility is to fulfill what you're talking about, what you're thinking about. So the subconscious mind is not logical. It takes everything literally. So if a person says, I really can't do math, you just have sent an email, and you're gonna fail. Okay? Now, if you're really brave, you can say, I can do math, or you can say it this way, oh, I can do math. No energy. Oh, I can do math. No. I can do math. I can do it. Right? Real loud like that. I can do it, see? So now the subconscious mind says, oh, this is new data. This is new data. So what's the secret? How do you go from the negative to the positive? Because that's kind of a challenge. Because people know that they're defeating themselves. They kind of know that intuitively, because that's probably intuitive as part of the subconscious mind, but they don't know what to do about it. So I would say this is kind of a little free advice here, whatever. This is all free advice, I guess. Whatever, So, yeah, sometimes, I get going and I just, all of a sudden, just everything kind of just phases out on me, and then I come back and get back to where I was before. Anyway, yeah, it's okay. The subconscious mind says, forget about that, Pete. You have something else to say. And so I said, oh, okay, fine. Okay, so I'll say something else. And so you say this. See, now the subconscious just said, out of my ear, said, Pete, just tell him this. Say, oh, thank you, I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. I used to have panic attacks. I used to have difficulties in my marriage. I used to have trouble with insomnia. I used to have trouble with my TNJ thing. I used to have trouble with getting along with people. I used to have trouble with my anger. Now the key word is that I used to. Now, then the subconscious mind strikes it out. Strikes it out. Now, the problem is that if a person is in the habit of thinking, I always get angry, I've always had insomnia, it runs in my family, you know all this stuff, right? All they're doing is perpetuating over and over again the same thing. So you just say, I used to have a problem. You see, when I was 13, I used to have a problem. I was a stutterer. Okay? And then I kept thinking, I want to be able to talk. I've got something to say. I could sing, but that's about all. And so I went to a really great therapist. Finally, the coach said, go see this guy. And then I started to talk. Because the first thing he said is, I said, everyone has failed. I haven't been able to do this. He said, well, he said something like Pete or Peter. He says, you know what? He said, you're going to find success here. You're going to find that within a very, very short time, sooner than you believe, you're going to be talking again. And he kept repeating this in a few sessions. And guess what? In 2 months, after 13 years of stutter, in 2 months, I start talking. Because he implanted in my mind, you see, that I can do this. Isn't that interesting? In a very short time, see, he convinced me, like Doc Rethke said, oh, run fast, you're strong, be a champion, go do it, you can do it. And so and the only downside, which was an upside, is my mom said something like, I told her, I said, you said after that, heaven help us, he'll never stop talking. That's my mom. That was great. But since I'm talking about my mom, we all have wonderful moms, and we have these memories and so forth, and I'm sure they've all had a lot of different things that's been said to you which have been great. And when I was about 5, she said I was complaining about something, because I used to complain a lot when I was young. Hardly do any of that anymore, just not worth the time. And she said, you know, Pete, if you don't like what you're doing, just stop doing it. Find something you love doing. That's 5. It echoes in my head. Now that sounds like, okay, that's just 10 seconds, 20 seconds, right? But as I've gone through my life, I have made about 10 major decisions. If you go through your life, you can say when you were 5, something happened, 15 happened. At least 10 times in my life, this is interesting for me, about every 10 years, I get an idea of I want to do something different. It's interesting. And then all of a sudden, I had, remember, a tenured position, and they said, are you thinking about quitting? And I said, yes. Is you giving that up? And I said, because I'm not enjoying it anymore. See, that's my mother talking again to me. And they said, well, you're going to change again? Well, you're 40 years old. Well, you're 50 years old. Well, Pete, you're 60 years old. Well, you're 70 years old. You're 80 years old. Now they stop talking to me about it. Because I'm 91. So what the hell? See? Yeah, Yeah, so what, right? So what? That's, yeah, so we have a choice. We have a lot of choices, you know this. But see, it's important to turn a lot of the things off. We got to turn stuff off. There's a lot of things that we're listening to, that we see, we hear, and so forth. Some of that stuff we know is not doing us any good, but we have to shut it off. We have to shut some of these things off. And then when we do that, we have an opportunity to perhaps understand ourselves just a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. And so find your own mantra, okay? This is my mantra, just so it's not complicated. But for me, it's simple. My mantra is, every day I learn something new. See, every day I have these life learnings. Every day I'm learning something new. Now what's this? I'm learning something new today. Oh, you know, John, before my wife passed away, I used to say, oh, I have this idea. And I said, you know, I just learned something. And so I'm learning every day, see? Look at this, like this, right? Most people, it's this. I'm getting older. I'm getting older. I'm getting older. I'm getting older. Oh my God, I'm getting old. Right? But if you're this way, that's not happening. That's not happening. Because why? Well, you can only think of one thing at a time, honey. You can only think of one thing at a time. You can't be happy and sad at the same time. Try it sometime. You can't be happy and sad at the same time. You can say, well, I choose to be happy right now, but next week or next hour, I choose to be unhappy. But the point, you see my point, right? You see it. So that's kind of one of the key things. How are we doing on time, by the way? How much more? 15 more? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, all right. So here's the deal. Change your brain waves. Okay? You want a secret to this thing? Change your brain waves. Right? Change them. Now, if you're unhappy about something, change your brain waves. If you panic about some things, change your brain waves. If you're unhappy in a marriage, change your brain waves. Just change your brain waves. Okay? Now, and I see someone kind of quizzical. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So, what happens? This is nice. I hope this holds up. Hold up, okay? Just hold up. Yeah, change the brain waves. See, this is the secret. Now, you may want to look up brain wave the synchronicity of brain waves. Okay, here's what happens. If a person's unhappy, now you probably know, and you've had some unhappy times in your life as well, and you know that you resort to certain things, right? Because sometimes when we're unhappy about something, some people will maybe take a nice stiff drink, all right? Because the stiff drink changes brain waves. Or they're anxious about everything. They're going to change their brain waves. Marijuana, okay? Oh, fine. What problem? Who's got a problem? I've got a problem. I'm fine. You know, I don't know exactly, I can't really say exactly what goes on with people who take marijuana, but I get the impression when I see them under the influence is they're easy to deal with because they don't talk much. And that could be a relief. Right. So, or they resort to overeating because it's kind of palliative, you know. I mean, they're stressed out, and so they eat. I hear a lot of my patients say, I eat for companionship because I'm bored, and so I eat. So I said, well, eat spaghetti, then you won't be alone. What? I said that to somebody the other day, and they said, what the hell is he talking about? Eat spaghetti, because you're not alone, right? You do all this spaghetti stuff. But anyway, so, okay. And so the other thing are legal drugs. I don't have any doctors in here. I'm sure they would agree with me, but they may not want to raise their hand if they're in here. But the fact of the matter is that people will take Zoloft, Prozac, this, whatever it is, and a lot of times it just masks the problem, right? But it really doesn't solve anything because it doesn't get to the core of the issue, which is what's inside. Self-esteem, self-respect, okay? So that's kind of what happens. So sometimes legal drugs with the side effects can be as bad as illegal drugs, but legal drugs. So the question is then, how do you change the brain waves? You can change them by changing your thinking, because when you change your thinking, you change your feelings. Have you ever noticed that? When you change your thinking, you change your feelings. When you change your feelings, it comes back like a tennis ball, back over the other side. Positive, 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 positive. Negative, 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 negative. So, you change your brainwaves. So today I had a little experience. I was talking to someone who had some issues and so on. And I said, well, one of the ways to change your brainwaves is, of course, to change your thinking more positive. That helps. And the second one is learn how to breathe correctly. And he said, what? You mean I can change my feelings, my attitude by breathing? And I said, sure. Now, I don't know whether I mentioned this, because I do a lot of roaming in my speeches. And I don't know whether I mentioned breathing before here. Did I? Okay, so you know then, thank you. So you know that when you are upset, you're full of that air. So all you got to do when you're stressed out and your brain waves are doing this, right? You start to breathe, you empty everything. Right down here with the problem of IBS and stuff, it's because it's tight in there. It's just fighting and everything. It relaxes. So then you get everything out, all the air out. Then you breathe in. And when you breathe in, it fills from the bottom up. It doesn't fill from the top down. It fills from down up. And people who can't breathe diaphragmically, they tell me after 1 week of practice that they're doing it. And they're not doing it, and some of them are getting off drugs with just breathing. Taking 5 minutes, a couple times a day, just breathing properly. And they're just, that's the way it works. See? That's the way it works. Just breathe out 4, breathe in 2. Breathe out 4. Make sure you empty the stomach and the diaphragm. 4. In 2. Out 4. Now, the secret is to practice. See, much of what I've said, I see your heads nodding. A lot of you know, I think pretty much what I'm saying. In fact, maybe all of you are, because some of you are not showing much emotion, but that's okay. Because some people don't show emotion particularly, but they're still listening, right? So anyway, you have to practice it before you need it. And I've had some people say, you know, I saw them the second or third time, and they said, last week I ran into a problem, and I ran around trying to find that page that you gave me, which is in my website, peterdufour.com. I wanted to find it, and I was in a crisis. I said, it's too late. It's too late. You need to practice when you don't need it. Then when you need it, you've got it. And so whenever I challenge somebody, and this might be something you might want to think about, a lot of times people think, I've got to change a lifetime for the rest of my life. I say, no. Just try it for 7 days. That's a Dufourism. I came up with that, 7 days. Some psychologists, when I was at the University of Washington, I even thought I was stupid at the time when I was just, I don't know, 25 or something. This book said, if you're going to change a habit, it'll be 21 days. Well, if you think it's going to be 21 days, it'll be 21 days. But actually, it could be instantaneous depending upon your motivation. But I simply say, so people tell me, they say, well, 21 days, yeah, I heard that. Now you're telling me 7? I said, I'm telling you 7 to discover some changes in your life. And then I usually call them after 7 days and say, John or Joanne, this is Dr. Dufour, how you doing? Kind of an innocuous question, you know. Oh, great. How are you doing? Oh, fine. Well, tell me about insomnia. And they'll say, what about it? Well, you told me you had insomnia problems. Well, you know, now that you asked me, I haven't had it. I've been sleeping really well. Amnesia. Because the change wasn't made here. It was made at a subconscious level. And so I say, okay, Joanne, so now I'll be seeing you again. Just keep doing that. Now, what about chocolate chip cookies? What about it? You told me that you love chocolate chip cookies, and you told me that. Now, I may not be, I'm a little that way on the phone, and they say, oh, well, you know, I didn't even realize for 3 days I wasn't eating them until my husband said, honey, you haven't been eating any chocolate chip cookies. Amazing. Amazing. Isn't it? Is this believable to you people, what I'm talking about? I mean, this is happening all the time. You just have to pose the right questions, the right time, and, you know, whatever. And see, once the computer is recalculated, and you know how that is with a computer, you got stuff in there, you got to delete some of it, right? And then you got to put new stuff in there. So all you want to do is you want to clean house. Take all the negative stuff there and take it out, get it out. And again, one of the ways to do that is slow down the brain waves, right? Slow down. Slow down. Put the canoe in the river and put the paddle inside the canoe, turn the canoe around and go downstream. Because everything that you want in your life is all downstream, not upstream. But my physical friends, you know, they're the ones that work out a lot. You know, I mean, they're physical. You gotta get out and really hustle and work, and you know, on and on and on. And okay, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It can be carried too far sometimes. But they say, that's so lazy. You're telling me to get in a canoe and put the paddle in there and just float down the river? That sounds like 60 philosophy to me. Go with the flow, right? Remember, you maybe read that in the books, those of you who are not born then. 60s go with the flow. Because everything you want is downstream. So this way you turn it around. Just use your emotion, go downstream. Once you're downstream and you reach what you want, not what you don't want, but what you want, then you act after. Then you act after. That, the canoe story is in the website. You should read it because a lot of people are really mystified. I've given this to a lot of people, and they say, I still don't get it. And I have a niece that's just starting college and so forth, and she happened to be with my daughter. she's 18 years old. She's got kind of a 4-point, and I said, well, I thought to myself, she's really smart, and she's going to just do great. And so I'm talking to 3 or 4 people about this. And so, I said, you got to go downstream. And my daughter says, I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. And several people, I don't know what you're talking about either. And my niece, who's 18, she said, when you're going downstream, that's about emotion. And I said, wow, you're right. It's about emotion, not effort. It's about vibration. It's about not effort. Sometimes we just try too hard. So I kind of like that approach. Now, one last thing. Where we go? Yeah, one last thing. Okay, one last thing. On my website, I have this thing called The Mind is a Biological Computer. And I talk about the subconscious. And then I show Machu Picchu, the big mountain in Peru. Beautiful mountain, And it's got a village down below that's all no longer there. And it's a big mountain. It's famous. Machu Picchu is in there. And so on this one page, I say, now, epigenetics suggest that thoughts affect cells far more than DNA does, the effect on your life. Because thoughts change cells, the internal intelligence of the cell. And so Dr. Lipton says he had a picture like a big blackboard, or like that curtain. Let's say the curtain, but it's just more of a blackboard. And it's the size of the mountain. And he said, now imagine there are 20 million pixels in that mountain. So just imagine, right now we're looking at that, there's 20 million pixels, okay? Now, okay, so, see that? That's what the conscious mind processes. At the same time that the subconscious mind is processing 20 million bits of information or stimuli. 40 different stimuli as opposed to 20 million stimuli. Now, what's more powerful? Pretty obvious, isn't it? But the subconscious relies on conscious mind to provide the right material. So you can have a beautiful car, but if you don't have the right key in the ignition, that's what happens with thinking. It starts the car, it starts the process, right? But once it's done it, the key's function is over. Now your cars operate on all this computerized stuff, you see? So I want you to kind of understand it. Okay, one other thing I'd like to suggest to you. The power of emotions. If you're going to do something, you need to put emotion into it, because the subconscious mind responds to emotion. So if you're going to start talking to yourself in a different way, or continue the way you do, don't be shy. Be more like Muhammad Ali. Don't be shy. Say, I can do this. Put your emotions into the positive energy. Put your emotions into it. I love what I do. By gosh, I do. I tell everybody, I'd say it to myself, I love what I do. I love coming here. I love it, see? Okay? I don't say, oh, I love it. It's just great, I say, I love it, see? Yeah, I love it. I love you, honey. And I'll say, oh, I love you, honey. Yeah, I kissed you last week. Why, whatever. Yeah, I told you when we got married I loved you. What are you talking about? You want me to remind you again? Yes, I would love to hear it one more time. One more time, okay. Okay, so here we go, back again to emotions. When you put the emotion out, have you ever noticed, in even your own families or yourself, if you get upset, Have you noticed the emotion you put into it? Have you noticed that? Have you ever noticed around you, some people, if they get really upset or angry or whatever it is, or maybe sometimes you've experienced the same thing, you notice the energy they put into it? Well, that's a problem. Because you're now just reaffirming to the subconscious mind, I have a right to be angry. So this is what I suggest. If it's negative, don't put any energy into it. So I tell people who are angry, I said, now, I want you to remember this. The next time you get angry, I want you to say to yourself or to whoever you're talking to, you know, I'm feeling very, very, very angry right now. Lower your voice. Don't put energy into it. I'm feeling very, very angry, right? We're told never to do that, right? Don't get angry. Don't get upset. Don't be selfish. Don't be this. Don't be that. And so we go around life stuffing all this stuff. So I say, give yourself permission. But just do it when it's negative, lower it. When it's positive, raise it up. See, a different dynamic, a completely different dynamic. What time we got? We're over? What do we got, 5 minutes? Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Now, a couple things. One thing, a lot of people will search out experts, and I understand that, that's fine. But sometimes, you know, we don't realize that we have everything within us to achieve our goals. Everything that we need, everything we want is actually within us. It just hasn't been discovered, that's all. We just don't know, so it hasn't been discovered. So, one night, and I was talking to some people about this in a workshop, and then I said, you know what? Find it within yourself, the wisdom within yourself. Because don't go outside to find the guru. Find it within yourself, because look at the letters. G-U-R-U. You are you. You're the guru. You have a wisdom within you. So rather than looking for a guru outside in the Himalayas, you know, in the Alps, or in some retreat, which is fine, but we try to find, like the Oracle of Delphi in Greece. She was this guru. And in Greece, these people would come to her, and she would lecture. And she would say, you do this, you do this, you do this. But think of yourself as a natural-born guru. Now, some people will have trouble with that because they think, well, that's egotistical. Well, you might be discovering something about yourself that's really important. Now, the last thing, I guess, is before we talk, and that is this idea about relations. I had an opportunity about 5 years ago to practice this, and then I kept doing it. The problem is with relationships is that we sometimes want to try to change the other person because we think that they're unreasonable. So a lot of times we reach a lot of conflict. So part of the law of attraction is say, stay positive. And so I said to many people, what's the problem? And they'll say, well, you know, my husband keeps criticizing me, and I say, how do you respond? And sometimes they'll say, well, I cry, or I don't say anything. So I said, you want to change your husband's attitude towards you? Yeah. Then I want you to change. And they'll say, how is that? I said, for example, why don't you just smile and say, you know, John, I've heard that before, and walk away. Now, John has to change. You see? Because it's stimulus response. You're used to playing this game back and forth. He says something, I cry. He says something, I get mad, or whatever, right? Or my mom says something and I cry. Change it to something. I had one person say, my husband's always talking about dying. And I said, what do you do? She said, I cry. And I said, well, you have a choice. You can tell him to shut up, which I didn't recommend, but you could if you want to shut up. Or just say, I've heard that before. And she said, I chose the last one. I chose the one about saying, I've heard that before, and I laughed. And she said, he hasn't brought it up once since. Okay? Got it? Yeah. Relations. Relations. You change the stimulus response. Because when you change your response, they cannot act the same way. They just won't. And the perfect example of that is someone I know that their mom was dying, and she was in a rest home and hadn't many times to go, and she was saying about her mom was criticizing her a lot, and she said she was crying, so I told her to kind of smile and say, you weren't perfect either, Mom. Something like that. I said, just say something different. And then I said, kind of laugh. And she called me and she said, you know what? I did what you asked me to do. And my mom and I sat there in the rest home and we laughed together. And then later she told me for the last month that she was alive, every time she walked into that room, they would start to laugh and enjoy each other. Because she changed, and then the mother who had been criticizing all this time, she said something different. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? Now, it's time for some questions. Now remember, you got some resources. You got the website, the material, you got the books, you got this lecture. And now, how about some questions about anything?
Hi, I'm actually in the Navy, so I can relate to a lot of those experiences that you spoke about, where sometimes it's hard to get something positive. And I try to teach teamwork, and sometimes it's trying to, there's always issues with power and control, and
Right.
And I think in the military right now we have the highest rate of suicide, as well as a lot of those medications that you mentioned.
And you're a caring person.
I'm
you're
career,
right.
career military.
So this becomes a kind of a difficult situation, right? One after another, okay? So here's what I would say to you, okay? I would say this to you, that whenever any of us, including yourself, are in a situation where there's a conflict, it could be in an office situation, or it could be in a home, but let's use an office situation. You're in this situation, okay? And you might be even in a leadership position. And so you're thinking, if I just bring this team together and talk to them in a reasonable way and give them some skill sets and do this and do this and do this. I've tried everything. I'll try something now. I'll try this. I'll try this and try this. And nothing seems to work. What I would recommend is this. Things are not working. The office is dysfunctional. The brass here in this particular place, Bad Kreuznach in Germany, whatever, they're not reasonable. So forget about those people. Focus on yourself and say, what can I do to make things better? Okay. Now I give you an example because, it's real. I was running a program over in Europe for all the military, all over there, and there were a world of problems, right? A world of problems. And I was in education with the Army, Navy, Air Force that were interested in the mission, because that's what they're interested in. They have to do the mission. And so there was this problem of functioning well. And so I was younger at the time. I don't know how, I think I was 40 or 50 or something like that. So I'm going through this process, and I'm thinking, well, what can I do to solve this? I got these deans coming from all over Europe. They're coming in here. And I have this agenda, and I keep talking to them, and I bring in people, experts. Nothing's happening. And then I said to myself, I'm leading too much. I'm leading too much. I'm doing too much. Pete, shut up. Don't have an agenda. Have them come in. Have them come in. And I sat there, and they're all looking at me. And they wonder what's going on. Are we going to get fired? I'm sure some were thinking that. And finally, one person couldn't stand it. And he said, well, if he's not going to have an agenda, I have an agenda. And everything changed. Because someone then took over, you see? So how did that all happen? I changed from trying to change people to just changing my method, or by sitting back, or like that relationship thing I talked about. Okay? Make sense? So you have to decide, what do I do to make it better? Because in most problems with relationships, what we're thinking about on relationships is, how can I change that person? Because they're the problem. And they very well be the major problem. They very well may be. But you have to just say, look it. You just kind of change the dynamics a little bit. What can I do? Don't press so hard, maybe. Don't insist. Maybe you have to say, look it, honey, little girls and boys, you don't have to clean up the toys anymore, or pick up your clothes, because there may be a kind of neat freak and they want everything picked up. I said, for 1 week or something, for 7 days, walk over the toys. Walk over the stuff. Don't say anything. And all of a sudden someone says, you know what? I did that. And one night, 4 or 5 days later, I walked in and all the toys were picked up. They were all picked up. Isn't that interesting? How that works? Yeah. Pick up the toys. You got to be responsible. Pick up your clothes. Be responsible. Her husband was the same way. He laid his clothes around in his his slippers and everything else. And she stopped doing it. And all of a sudden, the father starts picking up his clothes and his slippers. So you want to change something, you want to change the world or whatever, change yourself. Start with that. Get that taken care of. When you take care of that, all is good. I was on an Amtrak coming in, and just as I got off the Amtrak, this person had a bag that she was in a hurry to get off, and she shoved me ahead, and I didn't stumble, but I pulled my groin. But I turned around, and she apologized. I said, oh, that's okay. Things were going too perfectly anyway.
Let's give Dr. Dufour another round of applause. Before we close, I do hope you have entered our drawing. We'll have Dr. Dufour draw a name, if you would, please.
What do you want me to do?
Just draw a name. Well, looks like Jim Sund is the lucky winner. So I'll see you afterwards for your prize here. All right, so Dr. Dufour, thank you. Dr. Dufour has a gift of a book for each of you. So be sure to pick it up on the table on your way out of the theater. And if you've enjoyed this presentation, BCAT has recorded the event. There's a handout as you exit with viewing times. Also, a link will be provided on the Olympic College Foundation website in the next 2 weeks. The next presentation will be on Thursday, May 2nd, when Beth Wolf will present Dream Building, the Art and Science of Your Becoming. Check the Foundation website at olympiccollegefoundation.org under the Events tab, or watch for more information in the upcoming Lookout e-News. Thank you once again for joining us this evening, and I hope you have a great night.